I'd like to take a stab today at unframing a concept near and dear to all of our hearts, and that's schools. And think a little bit with you, starting with your past. I'd like you to think of your favorite childhood learning experience. Conjure that one in your mind. Think about where you were, who you were with. What did you actually learn then? How were you feeling at the time? And were you in school? How many of you chose a memory where you were in school? And how many chose a memory where you were not in school? That appears to be the big majority. So I wonder why it is that many of our most memorable times in life are outside of school and not in. This guy happens to be in school. He's doing an experiential education trip. And I bet it's one of his big memories now that he'll take with him perhaps for decades or the rest of his life. He's completely tuned into that moment right now and experiencing some new learning where he's engaged with all of his senses and he's thinking about what he should do and avoid and be a part of in that moment. 30 years ago, I decided to become a teacher. Not just any teacher. I didn't want to be one that propagated the status quo because, frankly, I wasn't all that excited about the education that I'd gotten. I had some great teachers growing up, and they were certainly an inspiration for me. But I chose to become a teacher because I wanted a revolution. I wanted to change schools as I had experienced them because I saw potential in them. And so I sought out a graduate program where there were revolutionaries like these. These were the ones that we studied. And they were preaching something that was very different from the kind of school that I had experienced. They were talking about democratic classrooms and democratic schools. They were talking about empowering students to make decisions about their own learning. They were talking about play as being one of the main avenues and motivators for children. And they were talking about the impact on society of service learning. That wasn't what I had experienced, but when I became a teacher, I started going forth into the world and trying to find those kind of schools and advocating for the kind of things that those mentors had taught me. Sir Ken Robinson is one of the famous TED Talks of all time, and he talked about how creativity in schools was absolutely vital because they had been formed in the generation of those futurists that I just mentioned in the likeness of a factory, not of the caring institution that would energize students to discover themselves. So why is that? Why did these factories of the 19th century that were maybe appropriate at the time, why did they not get upgraded in the 150 years that followed? And why did the school that I attended and that most of the adults in this room attended feel that way at the core? I wanted to explore that and try to reimagine what school could be. And that was what I set forth to do in my career, but I found lots of resistance to these ideas. It's not common for a school to embrace a different philosophy, and again, I wondered why that was. So I sought to try to find a place where I could reimagine school, and I've had a wonderful career on several continents, in many different countries, many different kinds of schools as well, and we, I think, have done some really wonderful things for children over the years. And then I arrived here in Jakarta, and I'd like to tell you about this case study that JIS has been. This is kind of a special school. It's got about 65 nationalities of students, about 26 nationalities of faculty. It's a very diverse population, and United Nations Day is quite a celebration here. In my first year here, though, when the school was turning 60, it made an amazing decision, and that was that it wanted to recreate itself. That's not what an accomplished school usually chooses to do, and that's one of the reasons why they don't change all that rapidly. But this school was willing to put everything on the table. Its mission, its vision, its future, its curriculum, its everything. So we held a summit. We brought and invited the entire community together. They all had input of various sorts, and about 150 people came for a weekend that we called the Dream Summit. And that Dream Summit was where we actually put the entire idea of the school on a whiteboard and said, let's create it together. We used a philosophy called appreciative inquiry, which is a branch of positive psychology, and it's a theory that says organizations should start when they're looking to change with their strengths. Identify those pillars on which you can build for the future. And this school has a lot of strengths. So we identified those, and then we dreamt about the future and the school that we wanted to be. And so we put those dreams together as a group, and we acted them out. We paid special attention to our Indonesian staff, to our alumni, to our students, to our board members, to our community members, who all had something to say about the school that they wanted to create. It was a big leap of faith, but that image of the school that we should become became increasingly clear as the weekend went on. It was acted out, it was danced out, it was dreamt about, and ultimately everybody wrote their own vision statement. And then we put them on puzzle pieces, and then we put those puzzle pieces together, and then we looked at all the words that were created there, and we looked at what left out, and this is what left out. A brand new mission statement, vision statement, set of values, and ultimately later some learning dispositions as well. So it was a recreated school. Looked great on paper. It looked a lot like what the people that I studied were espousing in graduate school. To have a school that's focused on passion and inquisitiveness and creativity and learning to be best for the world, not in the world, but for the world, so that service and public purpose is really at the core of what this learning is about. That's a school the likes of which I hadn't ever seen. But it was the one that just said that it wanted to become. And then the values, those were great too. There were 7 of them, and we wear them around our neck each day on a lanyard, and there were 2 that are kind of unusual. 5, I think many schools have, but there are 2 that are unusual I've not seen before. Balance, and a 3-letter word called fun. That fun one has been invoked like you wouldn't believe, or maybe you would believe it. Students remind us if lessons are not fun enough. The homework wasn't quite as stimulating as it could be. It didn't really get my creative juices flowing, miss. Could you rewrite that assignment for me? It also had kind of a sleeper value here, and this is a value that many schools hold, and it's respect. And what we ended up doing is respecting every one of the learners in our community through this process, through the process of recreation of ourselves, but also the day-to-dayness of JIS. We wanted to make sure that the voices that make up our community are listened to, that they have the ability to express, and they can go co-create the learning that's happening every day. We wrote some plans called destiny plans that really held us to account. A lot of great ideas like the vision statement that we had can float in the ether or gather dust on a shelf. And that wasn't the case here, because we wrote these and we held ourselves accountable for them. This is a message I got a couple of weeks ago from a parent. She's from Italy, and she said, my daughter every day has the energy and good feelings about school, so I wonder how JIS transfers this passion for learning onto the kids. In general, it's not so common in normal schools. Sometimes I wonder, we need more of these schools. JIS has to be a project to show the world, a good practice to put in on a box and share with the world. really. So can you put a school in a box? Can you export that product to another one, somewhere else in the world, or maybe down the street? And I would say both no and yes. No, you can't recreate another school because it reflects its surrounding culture. It reflects the community that it's a part of. But there are principles that do transfer, that can be exported and should be. So what's the key to unframing school or unboxing school and making it spread around the world and perhaps create the kind of school that we'd all like to attend? I spoke with a friend named Yong Zhao, who is an educational futurist, and I was with him at a conference, and I was with him at lunch, and he was talking about these schools of the future, as we all were, and having a great time, and I said, you moved from China to the United States, and I'm wondering how you selected a school for your own children. What were the criteria that you used? And he said, they should have a talent show. I said, talent show, why is that? And he said, well, you need to have a stage like this where students will stand up and try things and fail and fall down and learn from that and develop the confidence over time that they have something important to say. We actually have talent shows all around our school, and it's a frequent thing. It's not just the formal stages, but it's informal ones too, and we provide opportunities for students to display their learning. Tony Wagner calls it play, passion, and purpose are the three things that should characterize the learning of the future. Contemporary learning. I like those three Ps. And it helps inform the next one, which is personalized learning. Essentially, the factory-type schools of old, where dollops of learning were doled out to each student in the same degree, at the same time, with the same exam, on the same day, for students who are absolutely not the same. Why is that? Why do we do that? Don't we have the means to personalize and to really get to know each student really well and to adapt that curriculum a little bit? I think we do. In kindergarten class, where my wife teaches, they ask the students who are age 5 and 6 to redesign their own classroom. Redesign those learning spaces that would work best for you. And this little guy came up with a reading loft with music on it and the Legos really close by. Learning spaces are adapting as well. This was a former book closet and was converted to a really adaptable, flexible space that's inviting to children, where a lot of different sorts of learning can happen. And here those Legos pop up again. Robotics is sort of taking off all over schools. Elementary, middle, and high, we've got a lot of that going on, and lots of technology is being created by our kids. So it's not just them using those powerful tools, but they're creating them too. And our teachers remain the key. They're not being replaced by robots. They're not being replaced by anything at all. In fact, their role is more important than ever. And we need to feature them and bring them along and treat them as the individual learners that they are also, and tailor the kind of program that we offer to them. And then we need to hold ourselves accountable. We need to measure the kind of learning that we are interested in our school, and we need to do that in a systematic way. That's not something schools are good at. But we've taken those powerful words that we generated in the summit, and we've tried to figure out whether we're actually doing them. And so we got some support from Jim Langle and from Damien Bebel and people at the university level who know how to pose these kind of questions and measure them. This is Sonia, who is one of our students and is a brilliant filmmaker, and you should check her out on Soul Pancake because she's now making her living that way. This is an example of the kind of learning that we're talking about, one that we're also seeing on this stage today by many of our talented students, and that's sharing the learning on a global scale, not just keeping it to yourself, and that's in keeping with our mission to be best for the world. I love this poster, learning to learn. It was the afternoon, and everybody was playing. So to wrap it up, the three elements that I think that we can put in a box from JIS and perhaps give it to the rest of the world is respect every one of the learners that you have in your community and ask for their active opinion about how to create that learning experience of the future. And then provide them a real opportunity to shape that school, that guidance, those words that will be so key to your development in the future. Also, to use the modern tools that exist in this day and age and make sure that you're incorporating them as much as you can, because that's a really exciting space right now. There's a lot being created with big data and with cool tools that are going to help us to figure out how to personalize our learning all the more. But at the end of the day, here's what we're hoping for. Another three-letter word, joy. We want the learning experience by every student in our school and in every school in the world to be joyful. Thank you very much.